of Nun Ham Bet. The Gemara was trying to figure out why Rabbi Yehuda didn't need it there to be only one pedestal. Why he couldn't have the two pedestals? So the first suggestion was that he didn't trust you that writing would do the job. That he felt that writing would that people don't pay attention to writing, and wanted to base it on his position about having not having separate shofarot, essentially tzedakah boxes or whatever, contribution boxes in the Beis Hamikdash for the ola, for the ones that are for the birds that are chova, obligatory, which are divided between chatas and ola, and those that are pure nedava, which are all ola. And the concern was mixtures. So what's the concern of mixtures? So the Gemara said the concern is that you won't pay attention to what's written on which one, and you put the money that goes into one into the other, and that shows that he doesn't rely on writing, and that's the same issue about the pedestals. But the Gemara said that doesn't make sense because obviously he relies on writing because there were 13 shofarot. And therefore, you had to know how each one was different from every other one. And quoted a Mishnah, that said what was written on each one, and had Rabbi Yehuda as one of the speakers of that Mishnah. So clearly, Rabbi Yehuda relies on writing, and you could pay attention to the writing. So we have to now figure out two things is left to figure out. Number one, if so, what's the concern about having the shofar for the obligatory birds and that for the free will? What's the concern of the mixtures? And the other issue is, why doesn't he have two pedestals on Yom Kippur? Why does he only have one? We tried to connect those, but now we're seeing that those are not connected ideas. So we pick up on the middle of Nun Hamid Bet, and it says the following: Ki Asar Rav Dimi Amar. So it is 10 lines from the bottom, line starting with the word Amar. When Rav Dimi came, he said, Ami b'mar Rava, they say in Eretz Yisrael, Gezerah mishum chatas shemesu ba'aleha. The concern is because of a chatas that the owner has died. So it's not a concern of mixing the obligatory money with the free will money. No, forget the free will money. You don't want to have the basic point is, you don't want somebody bringing an obligatory sacrifice, or more specifically, a chatas, unless they're bringing it in person. But for somebody to just contribute the money and walk away and use that money for a chatas, there's a concern. The concern is that by the time you get around to bringing that money, even if it's on the same day, the person might have died. And then you're bringing a chatas for an owner that died, and that's an invalid korban. So the mixture is not, it'll be mixed with something else, but mixed amongst all of this money that has been given for a chatas, really half a chatas, half an olah. Some of it might be from somebody who died, and therefore you need the person to be bringing it in person. That's his concern. Okay, mishum chatas shemesu ba'aleha. So the Gemara says, Umi chayshinan, are we really concerned about this? Umi chayshinan, now I just lost my place. V'atanan, we taught in the Mishnah, if that's true that you always have to be in person, we don't want you to just give money and then walk away, because who knows, maybe the guy will have died. So then how can somebody ever send it through through an intermediary? Somebody who sends his chatas from overseas, he doesn't live in Eretz Yisrael, you can bring it on the assumption the guy is still alive. So there you go. It's exactly this case. The guy doesn't have to be there in person. So how is it different sending your chatas from overseas and putting money and walking away? So and presumably Rabbi Yehuda doesn't disagree with that. So why would this be any different? So the Gemara says, Ela, fine. It's not because of maybe the owner died. Ela mishum chatas shemesu ba'aleha vadai. No, it's that the owner definitely died, and now it explains the words ta'roves, mixture, meaning, okay, normally every day you can bring it and you can assume anybody that put the money in is still alive. That, by the way, is a general halachic principle of chazaka. If you were alive when you put the money in, we're going to assume that you maintained that status quo, and the guy is still alive now. Okay, we don't assume that status changed. But what happens if people put in the money, and then word comes to the Beis Hamikdash while they're using the money? Oh, by the way, we just heard one of the guys that contributed the money today, put money in the box today, he died today. Okay, so now what are they going to do? Now they know for sure that in that money is, in the money that's in that box, some of that money is money from a person who died. Some of that money can't be used. But how do they distinguish which money is which? How do they figure out, oh, this is the $20 that the guy who died did. Let's take that $20 out. They don't know which is the $20 that was given by the guy who died. They know a guy definitely died, so they know in here is money that can't be used, but it's all mixed up. So because we are concerned of the scenario that there will happen to be a case that a guy will die, and then we won't be able to use the money for that day. We'll have to throw all the money out. They didn't want to do this process ever. They never wanted to have the process of putting the money and walk away, because every now and then it'll happen that we'll know that some of that money won't be usable, and then we'll have a problem. Okay, and that's different than obviously sending the korban from afar. Then it's not mixed up with anybody else's korban. Okay, so that seems like a reasonable answer. So the Gemara says, 1 minute, we have a solution. What's the solution? So the Gemara says, V'nivrur arba'a zuzeh. Why don't we just take 4 zuz? Why it mentions 4 zuz? Tosa says that that's just an arbitrary number, like, take $5, take a quarter. But Rashi says actually that 4 zuz was the average cost of a bird sacrifice. Okay, Rashi does a whole little math to figure that out. But let's take some money, okay, however much that is. Vinishti mimaya, take that money, take out of all of the money in the box, take 4 zuz, however much is equal to a normal amount given for a korban, throw it in the ocean, and let the rest be permissible. So meaning, the Gemara wants to suggest something which I would call magic. Which would be, basically, okay, you got 4 zuz mixed up and you don't know which is which, just grab some random 4 zuz and just assume that those were the ones that had to be from the dead guy. Okay, if we would have tarovas work that way, if we'd have conscious work that way, it'd be great. You ever have a problem, you got some treifus mixed up? Just take a spoonful out and you'll assume that's the treif product. Okay, so it's a very funny suggestion. Now, it could be that the Gemara is willing to suggest it because basically the money would normally be batel berov, right? Maybe there's an assumption that normally the rules of bittul would apply, but maybe for certain stringencies we don't want bittul to apply. The interesting question of does bittul apply to money? Is that an idea of a davar chashuv or not? Does bittul apply when we're relating specifically to sacrifices and chatas shemesu? All these interesting discussions that we've discussed about whether we should allow bittul to apply. But in principle, bittul should apply here. So maybe the point is, okay, bittul maybe should apply. You don't want to let it apply. So let's do this trick and say that it all worked out. Okay, that actually is something we do find in halacha, which is called shani omer, because I can claim. So for example, it says if you have 2 containers of wheat, one that contains truma and one that contains chulin, and you have on top of it 2 smaller boxes, one of chulin and one of truma, and one box falls into one container and one into the other, and you don't know which fell into what. So it says, you can assume the chulin fell to the chulin, shani omer, and that the truma fell into the truma. So it says, how can you assume that? Maybe it's the opposite. So it says, well, it's all rabbinic, and it's batel berov anyway, so since it would anyway be batel berov, and it's only rabbinic, and it's all rabbinic, and maybe truma nowadays is only rabbinic, we can sort of allow ourselves to make these assumptions. So every now and then when you have a bittul case, which really should be batel, but for various stringencies it isn't, we allow ourselves to assume things worked out. So that could be what the Gemara is saying here. Take 4 zuz, maybe bittul should work in principle. Take a random amount of random 4 zuz, assume it's the one of the guy that died, throw it away and say everything is fine. Okay, so that's the Gemara. So why is it a problem? So let's take a look. So the Gemara says like this. Rabbi Yehuda would say, Leislei breira, he doesn't hold of breira. That now, what does breira mean? Breira is not this magic, Shani Omer. Breira, it's a little bit of magic, but not as much serious magic. What breira is you know what? Let's take a look at the example of breira, and then we'll discuss how it relates or not. But breira, the basic concept is something that happens in the future retroactively shows that it was always meant to happen like at the beginning. Okay, let's take a look. It's sort of a little deterministic. Let's take a look. Okay. Something like that. Okay, Breira and Basher, it has some similar words, but letters between them again. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira, and therefore he can't just throw out the money. So, how do we know he doesn't hold of Breira? So it says, Rabbi Yehuda, let's say Breira. Minalon, where do you know he doesn't hold of Breira? What we taught in the Mishnah. Somebody that buys wine from Samaritans. Now, Samaritans are assumed to, on their own, be good in terms of Trumas and Maasros. Yeah, but in terms of caring for other people's observance, they're not makbid. So for themselves, if you ate from food they were eating themselves, that would be fine. But if you wanted to buy grain from them, you would have to be concerned that they didn't take Trumas and Maasros because they don't care about your observance. So if you buy this wine from them, and it's Erev Shabbos im Chashecha. It's right about to get dark on Shabbos. Okay, it's right at Ben Hashmashos, right before Ben Hashmashos. Whole long Tosfos discussing exactly what the parameters are and how this is similar to another case of buying wine from an Am Haaretz, which has a similar type of a discussion. But here you buy it from the Kutim. What do? Omeid va'omer. You stand up and you say, Shnei lugim. So this apparently is right before sunset. It's still Friday, but it's about to be Ben Hashmashos. So you got to take Trumas and Maasros, but you don't really have the time to start measuring and separating. You only have a few minutes. So what are you going to do to make it okay so you can use it on Shabbos? So you omeid va'omer. You get up and you say the following. Shnei lugin shani asi lahafrish. The two log that I am about to separate, harei hein truma. Behold, they will be truma. Meaning, I am separating truma now. Okay, but what am I separating? Which amount? Normally when you separate, you have all this wine. You pour out a little bit. This is truma. You pour out 10%. That's meiser. Another 10%. That's meiser sheni. You have to measure. So here you're saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to give 2% for truma. Which 2%? Whatever 2% I designate after Shabbos. Okay, that'll be the 2% I'm referring to right now. And whatever 10% I designate afterwards on Motzei Shabbos, that'll be the meiser that I'm giving right now. So I'm giving the meiser. You don't know which wine it is. Is it this part of the wine, that part, top of the barrel, bottom of the barrel? It'll be the one that I designate after Shabbos. Now, why aren't I afraid that if I drink the wine on Shabbos, I'm going to drink it? I'm going to drink what I made? No, because what I drink won't be the stuff that I designate. Whatever's left over after Shabbos will be what I am calling Trumas and Maasros now. The stuff that I drink will be not the stuff that's left over, and that I designate afterwards. That'll be right now what I am making into Trumas and Maasros. Okay, so Shnei Logim Shani Asid Lahafi Sharein Truma. Two, if you assume 100, it's actually easier to assume 102. The math works out. So if there's 102 log of wine, the 2 log that I'll separate after Shabbos will be what I'm right now making truma. Will be those units that I separate after Shabbos. Asara Meiser Rishon. The next 10 that I designate after Shabbos will be the 10 right now that I am separating for first Meiser. And then you're left with 90, so 10% of the remaining 90 is 9. Tisha Meiser Sheni. The remaining 9 that I designate after Shabbos, those are the 9 that right now I'm making into Meiser Sheni. Umeichel v'shosa miyad. And you are meichel and drink right away. What does meichel mean? There's a debate of Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says it means mechalel. You transfer the money of the Meiser Sheni from the kedusha of the wine to money. Although what difference does it make? You're not eating it right now anyway, and you're going to deal with the Meiser Sheni later. But Rashi says you do whatever you can do to fix it. To fix it as much as possible. Okay, and that's what Rashi said.
You on a coin, then what do you do with this coin?
Then later you bring the coin to Yerushalayim and you use it as Meiser Sheni. It's Meiser Sheni money.
But you already did Tisha Meiser Sheni.
I know. So there's no need to really do that. It's just normally what you would do to fix things up is you don't leave your Meiser Sheni around. You transfer it to money, so you transfer it now. Tosfos doesn't understand the point. You're not allowed to drink those 9 units anyway. You need them to be left over after Shabbos so that they can be defined as the 9 units of the Meiser Sheni. So what difference does it make to redeem it right now? So Tosfos says Meichel just means matchil. Matchil v'shotem miyad. That you right away go ahead and you can drink it immediately.
It means by this you made it all.
Oh yeah, but then it's okay. Anyway, Tosfos doesn't say that. But anyway, okay. But that's the point. So that's how you do it. One of these huge Tosfosim here is, by the way, to figure out that's a very similar Mishnah that talks about buying wine Erev Shabbos from an Am Haaretz and also using Breira, but there are slight differences in how it's framed, and this first Tosfos works out the exact nuances of all the differences between how you would handle the scenario by an Am Haaretz and how by a Kuti. The basic difference is that by an Am Haaretz, it's you don't need to take Truma. You assume the Am Haaretz took Truma. Here it starts with Truma. And B, that the Am Haaretz, it's a suffix if they took Trumas and Maasros. By the Kuti, you assume it's a Vade that they did not. And because it's a suffix, we give you more latitude. By an Amaretz, we even let you do this Ben Hashmashos, whereas by the Kuti, we only allow you to do this on Erev Shabbos before it becomes Ben Hashmashos.
So okay? Means before
yes. That's how Tosfos understands it. Yes.
That's really Mibod Yom.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so now, anyway, this is the difference. This is how you do it. Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. So this, by the way, is the principle of Breira. Because right now I'm saying I am doing this right now on which object? The object to be named later. That's the object that I am referring to right now. And then when I name it later, we retroactively say that was the object you were referring to on Friday afternoon. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, now on Nun Vav Amud Bet. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon say, Osrim, they forbid it. Now, why do they forbid it? Alma, it must be their position is Ein Breira, that they don't hold the Breira. They don't say that based on what I do later, I could say that's what I'm referring to now. Now it has to be clear what you're referring to. It can't be, it'll be defined what I mean now based on what happens later. Okay, so they don't hold the Breira. So if they don't hold the Breira, they shouldn't be able to hold of throwing the 4 coins, the 4 zuz away, and saying that that was the money that was meant for the chatas. Now, here is 1 minute. Yeah, I know. Here is important to those to notice the difference between what this is and what this is and why it's not exactly Breira. With the case of the 4 coins, if I would have said I am designating, some of this money is hekdesh and some of this money is chulin, the money that's chulin is the money that I will later take and throw out. That's the money that's chulin, and the rest is hekdesh. That's breira. Right now, I'm designating something defined based on what's going to happen later. That was not the case by the 4 zuz. By the 4 zuz, there was actually a concrete amount of money that actually was owned by the guy who died, and he gave it as the chatas. Right? The fact that later you pick out 4 zuz doesn't mean that retroactively that was the money that the guy gave. Right? As I said, that's magic. That just means like, okay, I'm going to assume it all was exactly the way I want it to be. Breira is that when what happened is it retroactively can define something that was undefined before. And it was undefined before in reference to what was going to happen later. Then you could say, based on what happened later, it becomes retroactively defined because previously it was undefined. Now, even in there are 2 scenarios. Look, a lot of these huge tosasim, what makes the daf so short today, is that there's a lot of different sugyot about breira, and they all have nuanced differences. And to exactly make them line up and to figure out, like, does Rabbi Meir, according to this, hold like breira? Because if you look at a lot of other sugyos, it seems like Rabbi Meir does not hold of breira. And he tries to figure out exactly which scenarios fit in and which ones don't fit in. And that's why you have that huge tosos, right? So all of these have nuanced differences. But here are 2 cases of breira, which are different, but they're still not our case of the 4 zuz. One is this. You right now define something in reference to what's going to happen later. It's undefined now, but it explicitly has been labeled. Its identity determines on what's going to happen later. When it happens later, can you say retroactively it defines what has happened now? There's another case which is even a bigger chiddush, which is 2 brothers inherit an estate. Okay, is everybody with me here? Yep. 2 brothers inherit an estate. Okay, and a month later they divide the estate. Okay, and one guy gets, I get this half of the yard of the house, and you get that half. Or I get these sheep and you get those sheep. Do we say that means that retroactively in the last month those sheep were always mine, the ones that I took at the end of the month? Okay, that those sheep were always mine. Or do I mean no? In that last month, it was owned by the estate as a corporate entity. It was not retroactively mine. Now there, you never said at the beginning. The dying father never said, "Oh, the sheep that'll be yours will be the ones that you guys will figure out a month later." No, it just was this estate. But the nature of an estate is that it is something that is going to be divided, and therefore, and it is indeterminate right now whose is whose. And it will eventually be divided. So there you could say, although nobody designated something now, maybe still, since its whole nature is to be divided, and right now it is indeterminate who's whose, once it gets determined later, that will retroactively define who's always, though even retroactively, which sheep belong to which person. Maybe you could say that, although that's a bigger chiddush than when you explicitly label it and say, I am designating the stuff that later will be defined. But both of those are in the category of breira. Undefined now, determined later. Does what happens later retroactively give identity and definition to what was undefined before? That is breira. Again, it is really completely irrelevant to the use of the Gemara to taking 4 zuz and throwing it in the ocean and assuming that it's going to be the right 4 zuz. Okay, it was not undefined before. It was very clearly defined before. You're just hoping you got the right one.
Okay. This is even different. Because you can say that, the reason why they're not doing it is not do the prayer. They're scared maybe they'll drink the whole thing on Shabbat. And then they just won't.
Okay, that's what the Gemara will say. But I first wanted to just point out that the comparison to Breira, it's important because the Gemara says, it's based on Breira. And it's really, and that's one of those tries to figure that out. It's really completely different than Breira. All right, he doesn't have a real good answer to that. But anyway, I wanted just so that you have a clear understanding of Breira. Breira doesn't mean magic. What I say now determines that that's the way it was earlier. Okay, it only works when earlier it was undefined. Then we can say the future retroactively gives definition to the undefined past. Okay, so anyway, let's take a look. The Gemara says, Alma ein breira. So you see Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of breira, and that's why he can't throw out the 4 zuz. So the Gemara says, Mimai, how do you know he doesn't hold of Brema? This is what Michael was saying. Maybe he really holds like Brema. The whole thing by the wine would work. So why doesn't he let you do it? Because like it says in the Mishnah, Amrlo Rabbi Meir, they say back to Rabbi Meir, aren't you afraid that if you do this, maybe the wine will spill and then there won't be any left to take? And if there's nothing left to take, then you can't work your whole trick that it works retroactively. It only works if there's left over. So Michael said you'll forget and drink it all. They said it'll spill, but it's very risky. You might not have left over by the end of Shabbos. V'amr lahem, and Rabbi Meir said back to them, fine, I'll worry about it when it happens, which means I'm not worried about it. You can worry about whether the thing will break. I'm worried the guy doesn't have what to drink on Shabbos. I'm going to let him do it. I'm going to assume that there will be wine left over. So the Gemara says it might be that Rabbi Yehuda holds of Brera. He's just afraid that it's too risky here. And well, fine. I'll prove that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of Brera from the following scenario. Midatani Ayo, from what Ayo taught. Titani Ayo taught. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, a person cannot stipulate two contradictory things at once. Ella imba chacham lemizrach eruva lemizrach, lemarav eruva lemarav. If the sage comes to the east, my eruv will be in the east. If the sage comes to the west, my eruv will be in the west. Avalakan low. But not, to say if he comes to either direction, that you can't do. What's the scenario? So you might remember, going back to Eruvin, you see, there's a reason we learned these in this order. Anyway, here's the guy, right? He lives in this city. Okay, you have 2,000 amot in every direction that you can walk outside of city limits. Now, you happen to know that your Rebbe is coming and he'll be staying, and he will be, somewhere near your city come Shabbat, but outside of the 2,000 amot. Okay, he'll probably be within 4,000 amot of your city. Okay, so you want to go visit him. Okay, so you're going to make an Erev. Now, if he's going to be here, you'll make your Erev here, which lets you go, 4,000 in this direction, and you can't go at all in the other direction, right? If this is north, right, east, south, right. If he's going to wind up being here, right? If he's going to be here, then you're going to want to make your Erev in this direction, and you won't have any way to go in that direction, okay? So what you normally say is, look, I'm not sure whether he's coming to the east or not. Let's say the simple scenario is that he might be coming in this direction. He might not, but your only concern is he's coming to the east. So you put your Erev here, and you say, if he's coming to the east, if he winds up coming, then my Erev is here. If he doesn't wind up coming, then I'm just don't have an Erev. I'm with the city, so I get 2,000 all directions. Or if you think he's coming from the west, you put your Erev here. If he winds up coming, then I'm going to put my Erev here. If not, I'm going to be with the rest of the city. But let's say you don't know which direction he's coming, to the east or to the west. He might be coming from either direction. Okay, how exactly that's possible? Like, maybe he's here, maybe he's somewhere here, so he can sort of come in either direction, or we're not way up there. Anyway, I don't know. You'll figure it out. But anyway, you just don't know where he's coming from. Okay, so you put two Erevs. You put Erev number 1 here, and Erev number 2 here, and you say, if he winds up coming from the east, I'm going to go by Erev number 1. If he winds up coming from the west, I'm going to go by Erev number 2. If he doesn't come from the east or the west, I'll stay at home. Okay, so you make that stipulation, and then based on where he comes, that's where your Erev is, and then he comes from the north. That's where your Erev is, and that's what you're able to do. So Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like this. Rabbi Yehuda says, you cannot stipulate about two contradictory things. But you can't say if he comes this way or that way. If he comes this way, it's to the east, that way it's to the west. That's sort of self-contradictory. So the Gemara says, so first the Gemara just says that there is, I don't get it. It's all just stipulations. If this, if that. So if you don't like the east and the west, have to say stipulate both ways, because ein brera, based on what happens later, you can't say that retroactively, that'll determine that's where my Erev was. So if you don't like the idea that based on whether he comes to the east, my east Arab's in the east, my west Arab's in the west. If that happens later on Shabbos, that won't be able to retroactively determine where your Erev was on Erev Shabbos. So if you don't like that when you make two Erevs, you shouldn't like it when you make only one Erev. So the Mizrach Mami Nami, even if you just to the east or just to the west, why should you allow this guy to make a stipulation? Nami ain't brera. So you should also say, how could that work? Because, so what if he shows up, you only made one possible Erev? You put in the east. If he comes to the east, that's my Erev. If not, I'm within my city. And then he came to the east. Well, why should that work? That happened later on Shabbos. How could it retroactively define what you were doing? So the Gemara says, so what's the difference if you make only one Erev or you make two? Either way, you're stipulating, and it's determined based on what happens later. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Kishekvar ba chacham. You're right. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you cannot make any Erev based on a stipulation. And there really is no difference between making one Erev on a Tanai and two Erevs on a Tanai. So why does he say you can make an Erev just to the east? Because if the Chacham is distant when it's Erev Shabbat, and he's only going to come in the zone on Shabbat, and the condition will only be met on Shabbat. So on Shabbat, the Chacham has come into the zone, and then my condition is met, then it won't work. Then where my Erev is on Erev Shabbat is defined by something that happened on Shabbat. But the reality is that the Chacham is sitting over here, okay? Well, actually, no, that's your Erev. So the reality is, so if Erev Shabbat, the Chacham was out here, it won't work. But if on Erev Shabbat, the Chacham was already here, you just didn't know about it. Okay, so when you place the Erev, it wasn't going to be determined based on what happened later. Right now, the Chacham is already within the zone. I might not be aware of it, but right now he's already within the zone. So the case that Rabbi Yehuda says works is when you put the Erev here and you say, if the Chacham is already within 4,000 amot of the city, this is my Erev. Then that works, okay? And if the case here was you said if the Chacham is already within 4,000 amot, then it works. Then it's not something that happens later. Then it's right now defined. I'm ignorant of it, but right now it's known whether the Chacham is there or not, and whether that is going to be an Erev. The case that doesn't work is if you put two Erevs here. Two Erevs here, because here you can't, because why does that not work? Because in that scenario, although you could say he's either here or here, and I just don't know, the Gemara assumes that the scenario, when you put it to the east or the west, and both, and you say it'll be defined based on what happens, that that's a case where it hasn't happened yet. But he's going to show up into one of those zones. So in the end of the day, the difference is really not that you put two Erevs versus one Erev. The difference is that in one case, it's already happened, so it's not based on what's going to happen later, whereas in the other case, it is actually an issue of what is going to happen. On Shabbat, you'll turn up into one of those places, and that will define for me, and that doesn't work because of Brera. So the upshot of this is that Rabbi Yehuda does not allow the stipulation of the Erev to work if the condition is defined, comes up on Shabbat, because if the condition comes up on Shabbat, and that's when the condition is met, and then retroactively it'll define where I made my Erev Shabbat, he says, that I won't allow work, that's a Brera case, and from there we see that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of Brera. So it doesn't really matter one direction or two directions, what it matters is are you saying that the condition is met before Shabbat? Then it's fine. If the condition is met on Shabbat, and what happens on Shabbat retroactively determines, that is Brera. Now, one of these big Tososim, amongst these big ones, and this is a big question by Brera, because mostly we say the same, that there is a big difference between Brera and a condition. I can sell you, here my iPhone on the condition that that it doesn't snow another 6 inches today. Okay? And then based on whether it does or doesn't snow another 6 inches today, I will have sold you my iPhone, and that'll take effect as of now. Retroactively, it'll take effect as of now. It's not Brera. I'm selling to you as of now on the following condition. Okay? If anybody ever learned Maseches Gittin, and Maseches Kiddushin, this is your get on the condition that X. This is your Kiddushin on the condition that Y. Okay? You make a condition if the condition is met, retroactively it takes effect. It's not Brera. Brera is like determining the identity of something. It's not having a legal act take effect based on a condition being made. You're allowed to stipulate the conditions under which something takes effect. So why is that different here? Why does the Gemara think that making a condition where the Chacham shows up will determine where my Erev takes effect? Why is that a Breira? It's not like it's indeterminate what I'm doing defined by what happens later. No, I've just stipulated when it will take effect based on condition A or condition B. So here, and this comes up in more than one Gemara. In more than one Gemara, it sort of identifies some things that we would have called conditions, a Tanai, and the Gemara puts it in the Breira category.
Is the language always the same? In other words, conditionality is al-munad.
Right. Al-munad. Right.
The Linzer on it.
Right.
So could that language be used?
So it
and
could.
Then all of a sudden, before she will say it's a Breira question?
So it could be, right. So normally, no. Normally, the Almanat language is clearly Tanai, not Breira. And, in the end, the Gemara never raises Breira by all these sugyas of Tanai. And then every now and then in a Breira discussion, it throws in some type of a condition, which we would have called a Tanai, which we would have called a stipulation. So the idea is to try to identify what makes that condition different. And what I would like to say, and I'll give you one other example of this. I'm just allowing myself to digress for a minute because it's such a short daf. But it is another example, and Tosfos quotes some of these cases, is a man says to a woman, it's talking about Kiddushay Bia, Kiddushin made through the act of sex, okay? Which obviously we don't do, but it's one of the theoretical ways of doing the act of Kiddushin. Not Nisubim, which is later when they live together, but the Kiddushin done through sex. So the man says to the woman, we're going to have sex, and it'll be an act of Kiddushin on the condition that your father's okay with it. So it says, Ratza av mikudeshes, lo ratza av eina mikudeshes, and the Gemara says that's an issue of yesh breira. Why is it an issue of yesh breira? Why is it an issue of a tanai? We have tanaim all the time in Hilchos Kiddush, in Maseches Kiddushin. So it seems that the difference is the following. There is a what?
Somebody, if it's something that. In other words, I say.
Okay, so it could be. Yeah.
So somebody else.
So Tosfos tries to say that maybe it has a little bit to do whether Rashi also satisfying the condition is under your control or not under your control. But again, it doesn't work with a lot of the halachas of Tanaim, where it doesn't matter whose control the condition is in. But Tosfos definitely tries to work at that angle. I think the better answer is the following: is that there are some halachas where the question is, what are you intending? There are others where it is whether you want your act to take effect or not, as opposed to what your intention is. Meaning, if I say, let's talk about the case about the Erev. Is the Erev like I am doing this act and I want it to take effect under condition A or condition B? What's the real logic of the Erev? The real logic of the Erev isn't like an act of sale which then takes effect. The real logic of the Erev is, where are you starting Shabbos? Where did you start Shabbos? Did you start Shabbos? You started Shabbos at least, with the idea of Erev, where your Erev was. That's where you were intending to start Shabbos. So if I asked you, where do you want to start Shabbos? Did you want to start it at home? Or did you want to start it 2,000 amos out of the city? Well, where I wanted to start Shabbos depends. If this were to happen, then I wanted to start Shabbos here. If that were to happen, I wanted to start Shabbos. No, where you want it is a question of your current state of mind, your current intention, and your current state of mind. It's not a question of whether an act takes effect or not. I can do an act of kiddushin that will only take effect under these circumstances. But if you ask me, where did I want to be? What was my intention when I was at home? Was I imagining that my home was where I was setting down for Shabbos? Did I imagine it was out there? What my state of mind was cannot be conditional. It's a reality what my state of mind was. The effect of my action can be conditional, but my state of mind, I either was intending to start it here or intending to start it there. I think the same is true about the Gemara about Kiddushay Bia. The Gemara, for example, of Kiddushay Bia is, one way to understand that Bia is different. As an act of Kiddushin it's a very relevant halachic question, which is, if a couple is living together as husband and wife, and they never intended to do kiddushin, do we say that the reality of living together as husband and wife and having sex in a marital context, even without an intention to effect kiddushin, nevertheless, that reality of that type of marital life creates the reality of kiddushin? There are those that understand that that's what kiddushay bia is. It's not like an act which you define will take effect and the kiddushin will be chal. Can you do kiddushay bia la'achar zman? Okay, we're going to have sex now, and the kiddushin will take effect in a week. You do kiddushay kesav lachar man. No, the idea of kiddushay bia is that reality, if you're doing it in the context of marital sex and of a marital relationship, and not in a different type of a context, sex occurs in other contexts as well. Okay, but if you do it in the context of marital sex, then by definition, that creates the reality of kiddushin. If that's how you understand it, then you can't say, "Oh, I only wanted it to take effect under this." What were you thinking? Were you basically thinking seeing yourself as being married, or were you basically seeing yourself as having sex outside of marriage? You can't say, "Well, it depends on what my father would have said." How I saw. How did you basically understand what that actually was? So that's the brera. Brera means maybe it's not a Tanai, but maybe if you believe in brera, you can even say that what was in my mind at that time can retroactively be defined by what happens later. Okay, and that's why the brera, I think the few times you find brera used in a discussion of a Tanai is that you're not talking about an act that you are defining whether it takes effect and under what conditions it takes effect. That's the idea of Tanai. The question is, what were you thinking at the time? Where were you planning on starting Shabbos? How were you thinking about this act of sex? Okay, and that you can't say, well, how I thought of it would be defined based on what happens later. That will retroactively define how I was thinking about it at that time. To say it's not possible, it's only possible in the world of brera. In the world of brera, you can say maybe things that happen retroactively give definition to what was happening before.
It only gives definition later when that thing
yes, but when that happens, then retroactively, the idea of brera is when it happens. If you say right now my das is indeterminate, right, and it'll be defined, it'll be defined based on later reality. Well, that's exactly what brera is. Okay, which barrel of wine is truma is not defined. It'll be defined based on what happens later. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. It gives a little clarity to both brera and to how we use and how it's different from the idea of Tanaim. Again, the Gemara here is assuming that this case of Tanai is a brera, but for reasons I said, I think it has more to do with state of mind than with an act taking effect. And therefore, the Gemara concludes that Reb Yehuda does not hold of brera. That's why he has a problem if the Chacham has not already come Erev Shabbat for it to be determined after Shabbat. That's why he's got an issue. And if he doesn't hold of brera, that's why he can't solve the problem of the mixed up money and of the chatas that the owner died. Just throw some money out because he doesn't hold the brera. Of course, as I told you, even if you held a brera, you couldn't explain how that could work. But that's what the Gemara says. Okay, so now we have said what's the problem with Reb Yehuda about a separate box for the money of these olas, of these chatas olas. The problem is that the owner will die. There'll be money that's mixed up that you can't use, and because he doesn't hold a brera, you can't take some 4 coins out and just assume that those are the 4 coins that have to be thrown out.
So the example, example of the barrels of truma would be parallel to the couple. We'll have sex now. And if I fall in love with you a month from now, then we will have been married as of a month earlier.
Right.
The beer will have been the Kedusha beer.
Something like that, right.
That's ridiculous.
Okay, so now the Gemara.
Why do we bring up the whole thing with the Shkalim either?
The reason we brought up the whole issue about the money was we thought the reason Reb Yehuda, so thank you, that gets us back to square one. We thought the reason Reb Yehuda did not had only 1 pedestal and not 2 was because he couldn't trust to label them. You'd get it mixed up, and it tried to say that's his concern about these boxes of money for the the boxes of money for the birds of Ola and the birds of Achatas. But the Gemara says no, that's not based on labeling. There he trusts labeling. That's a different concern. The concern is the owner will die. It'll be mixed up, and then it got us into the whole digression. If the owner dies and got mixed up, why not throw the money out? No, you can't throw the money out because he doesn't hold the brera. Fine. But that's his concern there, that the owner will die and there'll be mixed up money. So, but he basically holds a ksiva. So we're back to question 1. Why can't he have 2 pedestals? So let's take a look. So, writing, labeling. So the Gemara says like this. So the Gemara says like this. So there, okay. So, okay. The Hashta Darmina, now that we hold Rabbi Yehuda ain't brera, he doesn't hold of brera, and that's his concern about the mixed up money about the guy that died, Haksiva Islay, but he holds of labeling, and normally he holds of these different boxes where the money goes in the base of Mikdash. People will pay attention to labeling. So Yom Kippurim Nami Navitray. So I don't get it. So why not have 2 pedestals on Yom Kippur? Back to that issue. Why not have 2 pedestals? V'nichtav label them. Right? That was our question all along. And now we see that he does hold of labeling. So the Gemara says, Mishum chusha de Kohen Gadol, because the Kohen Gadol will be so exhausted, he'll be so running around, meaning the chusha is not just exhausted, but so distracted and overwhelmed, and he'll be running around. Lava daite, he won't be paying attention. Like labeling might work under normal circumstances, but not under rushed and distracted and pressured circumstances. So here the labeling won't work. What is it? Who said at the end of yesterday's shir that there was a T-shirt out that basically says what if you make something idiot-proof, somebody will just build a better idiot. So you said that, Jonathan? Okay, so that was good. So that's it. Okay, so you know what? Labeling normally works, but not on Yom Kippur when the Kohen Gadol is running around like a madman. Then labeling won't work. Okay, so that's why he can't have two different things, and you'll get confused, which is
I'm glad he's got all the sins of the Jewish people.
Okay, so the Gemara says the ilote mahachi, because if you don't say that, looks even nami, you could have figured it out even without labeling. You forget whether you hold of labeling. Michael said make them different colors. The Gemara says there's other ways of telling the difference. Okay, the blood of the ox is a lot more than the blood of a goat. So just look which has more blood, which bull. Maybe you'll say you don't catch all of the blood of the ox, so you won't see the difference in volume. No, I'm a Rabbi Yehuda. The shochet in general has to catch all of the blood. Shenemar, as the verse says, all the blood. So forget labeling. Why doesn't he just look which bowl is the huge bowl? And they say, maybe because sometimes some blood will spill. Nevertheless, you would say one bowl will be bigger. But anyway, so what? The blood of a goat is whiter, and the blood of an ox is redder. So there's a visual difference. So still he should be able to look and to tell. No, because of his weakness, because of he's running around. He's not going to stop to process and think, oh wait, it's it's the big one, it's the redder one. He won't be discerning. He'll make a mistake. So here too, same story, why we didn't label it. So if you have two, you'll forget which one is which, and you'll get confused. If you have one, you have to pay attention as you're taking one off and putting the other down. You know exactly what you're doing. Of course, I still don't get it. If you ask me, anytime I had two in my hands at the same time, I could say, wait a minute, which was which? But maybe if it's clear, right and left, I don't know. You're in the process. Somehow that will make it, you'll get much less confused. And if you put them both down and stepped away, then you can really get confused. Okay. Now we have a practical application. What's a practical application? Practical application is the liturgy. Okay, and this is a fascinating thing because the first time, I believe, in all of Yoma, we actually get a insight into the liturgy of Yom Kippur and how all of the discussions we've been having about the avoda became part of that. The idea of saying over the avoda as part of the liturgy of Yom Kippur was something that went back to the time of the Amoraim, and how some of these issues and debates and discussions will impact what actually we say when we do the avoda on Yom Kippur. So let's take a look. The Gemara says, "Hahudinachis kamei de Rava." A certain shliach tzibur went down in front of Rava. That means led the davening, because the place that you led the davening from was actually like a pit, right? A pit lower than the rest of the floor, because like calling out to God from the depths. So a person went down in front of Rava to lead the davening on Yom Kippur. Amar, and he said, when he described this part of the avoda, Yotzev hinicho al kan sheni, the Kohen Gadol came out, put the blood of the ox on the second pedestal, he took the blood of the ox and he put down the blood of the goat. So Amarle, so Rava said to the Shliach Tzibor, you're conflating two opinions. One like the rabbis, one like Rabbi Yehuda. Now, how do you know that? The fact that he said there was a second pedestal, that's the rabbis. Rabbi Yehuda only had one pedestal. But then what did he say the order was? He said first he took the blood of the ox, and then he put down the blood of the goat. Now, if you have two pedestals, what do? Right? You're done with the goat. What do you do if you have two pedestals? What's the first thing you do? You put the blood of the goat down. right? Then you go over the other pedestal and you take the blood of the ox. So if you have two pedestals, the first thing you would do would put down the blood of the goat. If you hold one pedestal, you come out with the blood of the goat. So so there's only space presumably on the pedestal for one vessel. So you have to take the blood of the ox first and then put down the blood of the goat. So he said two pedestals, which would have meant put the blood of the goat down first. But then he said take the blood of the ox, which means that there's only one pedestal. So he says if you started off like the rabbis and you ended like Rabbi Yehuda. So rather say hiniach dam haseir v'notel dam hapar. Rather say no. Put down the blood of the goat. Take the blood of the ox, which means whose psak is that? Whose position is it? The rabbis are Rabbi Yehuda. That first you put down the blood of the goat. Who's paying attention? The rabbis, right? Because you have two pedestals. If you have one, again, you have to first make room for it by taking the water of the ox. So no. So he says, we costin like the rabbis. So say there are two pedestals. That was good, kan sheni. But then say the order correctly. Put down the blood of the goat and then take the blood of the ox. So that is the debate of one or two. Where Rabbi Yehuda's concern is not that generally he doesn't trust labeling, but on this day, with this type of being of pressure and whatnot, there he's concerned that the labeling will not, it won't do any good, and he wants to have it, foolproof, and he makes only one pedestal. But in the end, Rava said we will like the rabbis, with the nafkamina being the nusach of the davening on Yom Kippur. Let's go now to the next quote from the Mishnah. Okay, so now he's got the blood so now he's done that. He switched the bloods. He did the blood of the ox on the inside. He went and he shechted the goat without vidoy. I'll remind you. He did the blood of the goat on the inside on the Kodesh Kodashim, and now it says he comes out and he does it and he sprinkles it on the parochet, standing outside the Kodesh Kodashim. Okay, so that's I assume you all got the idea. But anyway, here you are. Right here is the which was the way it went? Is it this way? No, it was this way. Okay, so actually it wasn't an aron; it was a stone, whatever it was. Okay, so he goes in, and first he does the 1 and the 7 for the par. Then he walks out, right? He shechs the goat. Okay, he shechs the goat. He catches the blood. He walks back in. He does the 1 and the 7 for. I'm sorry, I skipped. Okay, he did the par, right? He went out and he put it on the pedestal. Okay, then he walked in. He shechted the goat. Walked back in. Did the 1 and the 7 for the goat. Walked back out. Now we'll say it's like the rabbis, not like Rabbi Yehuda. So he puts the blood. He puts the blood of the goat down. The blood of the goat down. So here he put down on this pedestal. Here was already the blood of the ox, which was waiting since the last time. He now took the blood of the ox, and he stands here by the parochet, and now he's going to do 1 and 7 on the parochet, standing outside the Kodesh Kodashim. Okay?
Somebody's stirring that blood of the goat.
No. I think it was a short enough time that you didn't have to worry about that. Okay? So that's where we're up to. Okay? Did the ox, went out, shechted the goat, did the ox, left the blood of the ox on a pedestal, went out, shechted the goat, came back in, did the 1 and the 7, came back out, put the blood down on pedestal number 2, according to the rabbis, took the blood of the ox, he's standing outside, and now he's going to do outside the Kodesh Kodashim in the Heichal, and now he's going to do 1 and 7.
Yom Kippur is the only day of the year when there's blood that's placed on the incense golden altar. Normally, there's no blood on
right,
the
correct.
altar, right?
Even the part that the avodah is done on the inside is not on the mizbeach hazahav. Correct.
Right. So
yes.
that's the only day of the year where there's blood on that altar.
Yes, I believe that is correct. Yep. Okay. So, Tanu Rabbanan, the Chenya says. So now we're going to get to this idea of where you know that he does it on the curtain. Then we'll worry, as Dov was saying, on the golden altar. Okay. So the pasuk says what? I'll just read to you the context where we are. Okay. ושחט את שיא החטאת של העם והביא הסתמו בפרוכת ועשה הסתמו כאשר סדר למפר ויזרתו על הכבוד לפני הכפרות. Remember we learned the otot tells you 1, the connection to the dam apart tells you the 7, the al lifnei tell you it doesn't directly hit, it just goes in front of 5. וכיפר על הקודש מתומוס בני ישראל מפישם לכל חטאתם. So he's mechaper for the Kodesh Kodashim. V'chein yaseh le'ol ha'moed hashokhen itam b'toch tumatam. So what's chen yaseh le'ol ha'moed? I mean,
the whole thing, the Heichal and the Kodesh Kodashim are the Oel Moed of the Torah. So what's the V'chein Yaseh? They understand the V'chein Yaseh is the sprinkling that gets done on the Parochet over there, which is quite fascinating, by the way, that designates all of Oel Moed. The focus on the Parochet, you would still assume, is a focus on the Kodesh Kodashim. But we're translating the verse, V'chein Yaseh, so the verse does not explicitly speak about the sprinklings on the Parochets, okay? But we are translating V'chein Yaseh Oel Moed, the entire Oel Moed, to teach me a sprinkling that's getting done on the Parochet. So let's take a look, okay? So, Ma Talmud Lomar, what is it teaching you? Kashem shemazeh lifnai v'lifnim, the same you do it on the inside, kach mazeh beheichal. So the Oel Moed is that you're standing in the Oel Moed, you're standing in the heichal. There's going to be a sprinkling in the heichal. Ma lifnai v'lifnim achas l'mala v'sheva l'mata. By the same, and by the way, the same way when you do it inside, the v'chein, which equates them, is the same way inside. It's 1 above and 7 below. Midam apar, kach mazeh beheichal. So similarly, when you do it outside, you do 1 and 7, and you do it with the ox. The same way on the inside, again, because the Torah never says you do both the blood of the ox and the blood of the goat. It just says do the same thing. So do the same thing. It's the same thing. 1 and 7 with the ox, 1 and 7 with the goat. Kach mazeh beheichal, the same by the heichal. But again, saying that it's on the parochet is not in the psukim. That the v'chein tells you fine, 1 and 7 ox, 1 and 7 goat. But Chazal's understanding is lit oel moed means standing in the heichal and doing it on the parochet. Hashocheni tam betoch tumatam, right? And so now we're having the end of the pasuk says oel moed hashocheni tam, which dwells amongst them in their tum'ah. Okay, so afilu b'shatein tmeim shchina imahem. Even when they are tamei, right? God's divine presence continues to be among them. And as I said, this is like a major point of the whole idea of the avoda on Yom Kippur, which is God says that v'shachanti b'tocham, make me an Oel Moed v'shachanti b'tocham, I'll dwell in your midst. But the problem is we're human beings, so we sin, and sin creates tumah, and God has to continue to dwell with us even amongst our tumah. But for that to continue to happen, once a year we got to clean out the tumah. We have to make it more possible. Go through this ritual. As I said, this is the national, right? We all focus on Yom Kippur very much at the personal level of our own tshuva and our own atonement. But the focus of the avodah on Yom Kippur is at the national level to do a cleansing of the sins at the national level, which allows God to continue to dwell among the nation and to continue to dwell among the people. And therefore, that's exactly why it's juxtaposed here. V'chiper, right? When it says v'chiper al hakodesh, we're not talking about atoning for somebody's sins. We're talking about cleansing the sanctuary from the tumah that was created by the sins. So it cleanses the sanctuary, mitumot b'nei Yisrael, right? So so it says, what's the pasuk? Where is it? I'm sorry. V'chiper al hakodesh mitumot b'nei Yisrael v'chivichem l'kol chatosam. It cleanses the Oel Moed, because God dwells with us in our tum'ah, but we have to do something about cleaning that tum'ah up on a regular basis to allow that to continue. God will sustain it, but it will only sustain it for so long, and that's hashocheni tam b'tov tumotam. But we do our job of cleansing the tum'ah once a year, okay? Afilu b'shakein tmeim shchina imahem. Now, Amalei Hahut Tzeduki the Rabbi Chanina. So a certain Sadducee said to Rabbi Chanina, I didn't check. It probably original gives us a min. Does anybody have some of those New English editions? I think have the improved, the correct. What do you have there, Michael? Is that the Narda Gemara you've got? Mina, right? Okay, that's what I said. So a certain heretic said to Rabbi Chanina, and a heretic is very often a Jewish Christian. Okay, said to him, Hashda bari tmeimatan. You are definitely impure nowadays, meaning you've been rejected. I would retranslate it that you've been rejected by God because of your sins. Okay, so deceive to masab b'shulah. Your tum'ah is on the cleaning to the hems of your garment, which is actually very much evoking the whole tum'ah of menstruation and of nida, and gets to other issues about how nida becomes a focus. But anyway, he says, yeah, you're all sullied and tameh, and God has rejected you. Right? That's the Christian claim. We've been rejected by God. Amalei, he said to him, let me show you what it says about them. We might be tamei, but God stays with us. Okay, so You think, so a few bisman shein tmeim shina shruya
I thought you made
beinayhem.
that ritual once a year to clean it up, though.
Yeah, but now we're
Now
sort
you
of
don't have
extracting that. Well, that's for the mikdash. We don't have a mikdash. Anyway, that's also like an interesting point, right? Because it raises the whole question of post the mikdash. Does that mean God has departed from us? How to interpret, right, that? But Michael is correct. The boldness here is that it's taking it out of the pshat, which is God is shochein amongst us in the presence of the mikdash, number one, so it's only true when there's a mikdash, and number two, when we go through this ritual, okay, so without a mikdash and without a ritual, you might say the pasuk isn't referring to that,
Right.
but yeah, the Chazal, of course, reject that and say, no, God is always with us, even without a mikdash, in all times, even if we are tamei, we have not been rejected by God, so as opposed to, the claim of the angry God of the Old Testament that has punishes and rejects and so on. This response is no matter how tamei we are, God is always continues to dwell with us. Okay, so we'll end for that for now.
You
Yes.
know what, Rabbi Linzer, I also wanted to ask, theologically,